Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. My name's Fish80 and today we've got some new information regarding wildcards in Minion Masters. Now, to bring you up to speed, let's recap a little bit. So, wildcards are the ability to have duplicates of a card in your deck. So currently there's no wildcards in the game because there has been a test to see what the game is like without them. But previous to that, you could have 2 wildcards in your deck. That means you could have up to 3 copies of a single card or 2 copies of 2 cards, that had its own impact on the balance of the game. So if you had a card that was very strong, you could run 3 of them, then it could run a little bit out of control. So what Bearded Dwarf did is they did a survey to see what people thought about wildcards being in the game, and then they did a test to remove wildcards. So in the season we're in right now, which is version 1.27, there are no wildcards in the game. What they've then done is done a second survey to see how people are feeling about the game with no wildcards in. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the results of that survey. And then we're going to look at the next survey, which is going to be the proposed future of wildcards within the game. Now, I have my own opinion, like you guys do as well, and that may or may not reflect with what the survey says. But what I ultimately want is what is best for the game. And I'm not going to use this platform as a way of trying to get my thoughts across to you. I will just use this as a way of giving you the information, telling you what's going on, and then allowing you to make up your mind. And then, based on the results from the survey, Bearded Dwarf will then make their appropriate decision. Okay, so hopefully that's brought you up to speed. So without any further ado, let's jump into the results of the survey. So there is a blog post that I'm going to be taking my information from. The link to that will be in the description, so if you want to read it yourself, go through it at your leisure, then you can do so through that link. Okay, so let's switch over here and we'll go and start looking through the results of the survey. So the first thing the survey asked was just simply, do you prefer the game with or without wildcards? And here we can see 1,900 people responded, so a good number of people. And we've got 67.2% prefer the game with wildcards. Only 32.8% without wildcards. So that's quite a stark start to this information. Okay, so majority of people prefer the game with wildcards. But let's go a bit deeper and find out a little bit more about what was gleaned from the survey. So here we see, this gives you a bit of information about what people like to wildcard. So 18% of people didn't wildcard anything. 17% wildcarded just one card. 35% wildcarded one card but twice. And the majority, over 50%, wildcarded 2 cards at once. So that's 2 copies of 2 cards in your deck. Now, moving further, we can see that when we talk about the specific ranks, it's shown here that 2v2 randoms is the preferred mode where wildcards are used. So here we see the question was, or the response, I think wildcards are at their best in these modes. And here we see 58.9% 2v2 randoms. 1v1 is the lowest. And then on the other side of this coin, we've got people, I think wildcards are at their worst in these modes. So 50% of people said wildcards are at their worst in 1v1. So I assume what they mean by that is that wildcards are most impactful in 1v1. Whether I agree with that or not is not necessarily the case, but these are the results of the survey. And then, of course, the other thing that we need to consider, and the devs need to consider, is the different ranks. So the different ranks kind of give you an idea of people's experience in the game, and whether they're kind of playing the game for fun or playing it competitively and try hard. So when we have a little look at the a little graph here, hopefully you guys can make that out. Let's have a look. So support for wildcards falls with higher ranks. So you've got the different lines here. The blue line is for 1v1, the red line 2v2 randoms, and the yellow line 2v2 pre-mades. But you can see with all 3 of those, the higher the rank you get, the support for wildcards drops. So We can see the blue line for contender almost down to 25%. So I think that's an important thing to consider, where you've got lower ranked players, newer players liking wildcards, more experienced players, higher ranked players not supporting wildcards quite so much. So that's interesting to see. Right, moving on. So basically what we've seen here is the results from the survey, what people have said. Now the question is, where do we go from this? So this is where the next survey comes in. The developers have given, this is going to be wildcard survey number 3, and we'll link that in the description for you to check out, and hopefully you can fill it out. Now, the survey is going to be running until 1 PM GMT on Friday, August the 27th. So you've got a few days to fill it out and let them know what you think. Okay, so just to recap, these are the proposed solutions. So we're going to go through them one at a time. There's 5 proposed solutions. So, proposed solution number 1. Only allow wildcards in 2v2 randoms. So that's based off the results where people have said that they mostly wildcard in 2v2 randoms. So the proposed solution is only allow wildcards in 2v2 randoms. That means no wildcards in pre-mades, no wildcards in 1v1s. Right, solution 2. Disallow wildcards only in 1v1. So again, this is where the results have pointed, where the survey have suggested that the wildcards are most impactful in 1v1. So option 2 is disallow wildcards only in 1v1. So that means you can wildcard in pre-mades, you can wildcard in 2v2 randoms. Option 3. Have a wildcard stat. So what this means is there's going to be the potential for an extra balancing tool. So the developers can state how many times a wildcard can be used on a specific card. So that's going to be either 0, can't wildcard it at all, 1, you can only wildcard it once, or 2, you can wildcard it like before the current season. So that means if there's a particularly problematic card, they can start, instead of having to balance it by mana cost or changing the stats, they can restrict the number of cards, number of times it can be used. So if we talk about an example like the Brutish Betrayer. So the Brutish Betrayer, when you were able to run 3 of them, was very problematic. But also from a balance point of view, it was problematic because the Brutish Betrayer shares the same statistics, the same model as the regular rammer. So that means they couldn't really adjust the mana, because if they increase the mana of the Brutish Betrayer, it would become the same as the regular rammer. They couldn't change the damage stats because it shared it with the regular rammer. The only thing they were able to do was to adjust it with regards to the effect that it has on it, the damage that it does to your own master. Whereas in this case, with this suggestion, with the wildcard stat, they could restrict it. So they could say, you can only use 1 wildcard on this, so maximum 2 rammers. Or no wildcards, no rammers over and above your original one. So what option 3 is the wildcard stat, where the developers on a card-by-card basis can restrict the number of wildcards that can be used on that. So if there's something, like we said, that's overpowered, then it can be addressed, and that's another balancing tool for the developers. Option 4, 1 wildcard per card. So still 2 wildcards available, but you're restricted to only 1 per card. So that means you can only have 2, maximum of 2 of any particular unit. And option 5 is simply to revert back to previous, where you had 2 wildcards and you could use them without restriction. So those are the 5 potential solutions, proposed solutions that the developers have come up with. So those are the ones that are in the survey. So I encourage you to go to the survey, which we'll put a link in the description. Have your say. Let them know what you think about these solutions. So just to go over them very quickly once again. Only allow wildcards in 2v2 randoms. Disallow wildcards only in 1v1s. Have a wildcard statistic where you can limit on a card-by-card basis how many times it can be wildcarded. Another balancing tool for the developers. 1 wildcard per card, or revert back to 2 wildcards and have no limit on how you wish to use them. So that's just a quick video here that I wanted to do. We covered the response from the survey and what the information the developers have given us, and now we've spoken about the proposed solutions. So please go and check out the survey and have your say. Check the description, the details will be in there. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, just a quick one giving you an update on the situation. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, drop a subscribe if you haven't already, really appreciate that. And of course check down in the comments, see what the discussion is, see what other people are thinking, let us know what you're thinking. But I appreciate you dropping by. My name's Bad as Fish 80, and I'll see you soon again here in the fish tank.